Hi there. Museum spaces filled with works by master painters seem irrelevant to many photographers. Now that we've moved on from the discussion about whether photography is art or not, there is a presumption that we can operate separately from the established art tradition. During the last century, photography and painting have influenced each other, but photography owes a far greater debt to the painting tradition. I've chosen just one of these aesthetic foundations to explore during this video: how to create emphasis within your frame. Another way of looking at it is how to draw attention to your subject. I'll focus on the tools that are available to us and offer examples of both painters and photographers who've got this right. Of course, the standard rule about any rule is that once you've understood it, you can learn how to counter it.
They say that the camera never lies, but it can stretch the...
I'm going to look at 5 techniques that we can apply to emphasize our subjects. Photographers have borrowed these fundamentals from painters, even if they don't know that they're utilizing them. I was never formally taught about art theory or about photography for that matter, but I internalized these ideas by looking closely at photographs that I liked and questioning why do they work and why do others not. Understanding the theory behind these techniques allows you to consciously choose the manner in which you want to formalize or structure a scene. Even if your plan is to discard a number of these conventions, you will still have to have some structural device in order to attract and hold your viewer's attention. Sometimes we see an appealing image and it just seems chaotic, and you might think the artist has discarded all of the image design concepts. But when you deconstruct them, you'll find that the creators have used some form of dynamic symmetry within the composition. This is Pablo Picasso's Guernica painting, which at first glance looks unstructured and overwhelming, but you find yourself drawn into the painting. Essentially, there's a set of vertical, horizontal, and diagonal lines that help create rhythm, movement, and unity. As viewers, our brains then respond to these elements in a way that we perceive as aesthetically pleasing. This photograph of Salvador Dali by Philippe Halsman also looks disorganized, but it has a number of compositional structures that give it form. Recognizing contrast is easy. If you squint your eyelids like Clint while you're looking at a scene or an image, you're essentially getting rid of all the secondary details. From the blurred scene, you can then decipher what contrasts are at play. The first example of contrast is tonal variance, using light and dark areas. The basic idea is that you frame your dark subjects against a light zone and a light subject within a dark area. In this case, Rembrandt has allowed all of the background detail to fall into shadow, while letting the light wrap around the 2 figures embracing in the center of the painting. This increases our focus on the subjects, but also adds drama and mood. I've chosen some Josef Koudelka images to illustrate how effective this technique can be. I don't think about these concepts as rules. They are better viewed as understandings or guidelines for image design. The second example of contrast involves light temperature. In this famous Claude Monet painting called Impression Sunrise, the majority of the frame is immersed in a bluey, greeny haze. The bright orange sun is an immediate focal point, but there isn't much going on within that space. So our eye wanders down through the orange reflections until we find the central rowing boat. The dark boat is also contrasted against a clear, lighter section of the water. Photographer Ernst Haas was very aware of color temperature and how he could use them to create contrast. There are other ways of drawing the viewer's attention through contrast, such as shape and texture. In this painting by Andrew Wyeth called Christina's World, the woman's eyeline, the direction of her arm, and the track lead one into the distant buildings. So the elements have then established that the event is happening on a farm. But there isn't much to look at up there. So your eye then comes back to the woman in the foreground. The light dress and the skin against a darker brown background adds tonal contrast. Also the pink tinge in the dress against the yellow-brown produces a color contrast. Her strange posture also provokes questions. But the thing that makes us most uneasy and sparks alarm bells is that she's so far away from the dwellings. It's her isolation that disturbs us and makes us want to find out what's going on. Dorothy Lang uses this technique of isolation to spark an emotional reaction. Another variation of the isolation technique is to separate out information. In this painting by Mark Rothko, he's created visual emphasis by his use of contrasting colors. And in so doing, he's created emotional emphasis. This refers to de-emphasizing the information surrounding the primary subject. It can be done by juxtaposing strong colors against duller colors, or by creating spatial relationships. In Paul Cézanne's Still Life with Fruit Dish, the brightly colored fruit stands out against the dull blues, browns, and whites. The subject is also placed in the foreground, and therefore relatively it comes across much bigger than the background detail. William Eggleston used the presence of color to make his subject stand out above the surroundings. Gary Winogrand has placed his subjects in the foreground, and even though there are a lot of things happening within the frame, we're in no doubt about what the main subject is. Some photographers achieve this result by desaturating the surrounding detail or saturating the subject's color. By creating strangeness, one is immediately provoking the viewer into ask the question, why? Why are the horses blue in this painting by Franz Marc? In this surrealistic painting by René Magritte, we are immediately thrown off balance by the apple in front of the man's face. The rest of the image is quite ordinary, so we have to ask, what is the artist trying to say by doing this? I've purposely left the rules of composition to last. These rules determine how we arrange visual elements within the frame so that we can direct the viewer's attention through the painting or the photograph or onto a specific place within the frame. I've already produced 3 videos on the subject, so I'll leave the links in the description below. Composition is the primary method of enticing the viewer to become interested, engaged, and involved in a work. All of the compositional rules therefore contribute to directing emphasis. I thought that The Scream by Edward Munch would be a good painting to end on, because Munch has managed to maximize all of the techniques that I've discussed. Look at contrast. The light face is contrasted against the darker blue water. Even though he hasn't used light temperature contrast to highlight the face, it's their absence that adds to the emphasis. The figure is isolated in the foreground, away from the busyness of the background. Even though the sky and the balustrades are a color focus, he hasn't created anything that competes with the drama of the foreground. Therefore, everything else is subordinated to the screamer. He's created a startling exception by making the face weird and frightening. In terms of compositional design, there are so many movement, shape, and line elements in this image. It's almost like a pop song made up of loads of hooks. So next time you hurry past those boring old masterpieces on your way to see the latest cell phone photography exhibition, stop for a minute and give those dead painters a second chance. Often their apprenticeships lasted longer than the average mobile phone. Creating emphasis in photography is complex, so I hope this video simplified things for you a bit. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.